Hello and welcome back to the NBA DFS Slate Breakdown for Wednesday, October 30th. I'm your host, Tyler Wiemann, at FlatTyler83 on Twitter and your DFS sites. Now we are going to dive into this full slate. It is two different slates depending on FanDuel and Draftkings. Draftkings only has 8 games. FanDuel, I believe, has 11 because they have the night games where Draftkings doesn't. But we will go through all of it as normal. Now, come join us at LineStar. $39.99 per month gets you access to all we do, but there are a couple ways to try us out for free. 7-day free trial through the app stores, either Android or iOS app store. Just download our app and sign up that way. We also have these promo offers down there: ParlayPlay, Sleeper, Underdog, Chalkboard. If you are a new customer to any of them, you can deposit money, play, and get a free month from those sites. Now, let's get into the fun stuff here. So 8 games on DraftKings, 11 on FanDuel, and let's just jump right in. So our highest owned today is Jordan Poole at 28%. Highest owned at point guard, that is. 3-star alert score. Washington is going to be out without Kuzma, which is just going to give a boost to the usage of Jordan Poole, which is already pretty high this season, and he's been playing pretty well. Don't mind the spot. I'm definitely going to have some of Poole. I might be slightly under the field, but it is a decent spot, and I'm going to have a decent amount of him. Next, we got LaMelo Ball. He is probably going to be... we have him at 16%. I might be slightly over that. I do like his spot versus the Raptors. One thing is a little scary for the Raptors is that there is going to be no Scotty Barnes. They were already a little hurt with injury, and now it is even worse over there. So this is going to be an interesting game to see how it plays out. There is a chance that Toronto really struggles. The one thing I will add, though, is we really need to wait for that Toronto lineup. I think there is a chance that we get Jamal Sheed starting. He's played very well, had 18, 19, 25, 19 minutes, so he's been around that 18 to 20 minute range. Davion Mitchell would probably slide into the point guard spot, but he's just not that much of a point guard as far as, you know, being a good distributor of the ball, whereas Sheed actually is. And I mean, he's averaging 4.8 assists in 20 minutes. So I think there is a slight chance that they do have Sheed starting. And if that's the case, at 3,900, he's going to be super high owned and very, very interesting. Mitchell, I'm also going to have some, I'm going to have some of Mitchell as well, just because he's 4,600 and good defensively. So he can get those steals, blocks, whatever, to add up to those points. But he's not going to add a ton in those counting stats. Shahid, I think, is super interesting. And even if he's not starting, I think there is a chance that he plays, 22, 24 minutes. And if he does that, he's a nice little value. So little tangent there, but we'll get back on pace here with Trae Young, 14% owned, 9.8K. I'm on the Trae game once again. Not as hard as I have been lately, but this is an interesting game. The Hawks versus the Wizards, and still all season, DeJounte Murray pricing hasn't totally caught up to that, but it's still, right around that 10K spot, and I'm fine going to some Trae. I'm not going to be super heavy on him, but probably will be right around the field. Now let's go to some pivots. Brandon Podziemski, there's no way that he isn't going to be higher owned than 10% owned right now. I would expect that goes up throughout the day. He absolutely crushed last night, 34 minutes. Without Curry, he's going to play a lot again. Wiggins could be back, though, so that is the one wild card as far as how many minutes Podziemski plays. But they really don't have a ton of ball handlers, point guard-like players without Curry. So Podziemski's probably going to be pretty solid and play a decent amount of minutes again. We got him at 31. I would say he's likely, 32-ish but it's going to be in that 30 to 34 range likely for him. And I think he's a great play in this situation. Definitely willing to go there. James Harden, 9,200. Guys put up 50, 53, and 43 in his 3 games. Now he has a great matchup versus Portland. I am going to be all over James Harden. He is going to be one of my highest owned players on this slate. And with him being lower owned, I think it is wild. He is back to the James Harden show. Anthony Simons, 6,500. We know if he gets hot, he can single-handedly keep the Trailblazers in a game. He is a good shooter. He is starting at point guard. I'm interested in him for sure. He is going a little too cheap. And if this game stays close and you're on FanDuel, it could be a very nice late night hammer to have a little stack in that game. Tyrese Halliburton, 8,500 versus the Celtics. It isn't the sexiest spot versus the Celtics, that is for sure. But this is a guy that's 8,500, and we have seen highs of, 60, 70 points when he gets it going, and regularly, flirted with low 40s last year, or, was regularly in that range. I am back here at this price, so I'm, even in a tough matchup, I don't mind to go there. And next, Dennis Schroeder. I feel like I am a broken record, but dude has been good ever since he got to Brooklyn. He's been playing a lot. His usage has been solid. Just put up 44 and 46. Now people are probably starting to come here, and his price is getting higher. So I'll probably start getting off him a little bit soon. But right now, I'm still in it. And I think Schroeder's in a decent spot. Don't mind going there whatsoever. Now, let's get over to point guard on DraftKings. Our high-owned Jordan Poole, we talked about him already. Next, we got Jalen Suggs, 5,500. So it appears my minutes worry for him are over. 31 and 35 the last 2 games. If he's playing that many minutes, he is priced fairly correct, maybe a little bit low just because he does have that mid 40 point ceiling at this price, but he does have a very low floor. I'm fine to have a little bit of him here. I'm not going to go super heavy though. Trae Young, LaMelo, we talked about them both. Trey Mann has been right around that 30-minute mark, and in a good matchup, you got to consider him as well if he's at 5K. However, at 5K, his price is getting up there where I am pulling off him a little bit. Carlton Carrington, Bub Carrington, if you want to go there, you can. He's cheap enough where it's still in the realm. Issues here is that I just don't love the upside, and I think I would rather go to Corey Kispert, who's priced a little higher, but has a way higher ceiling. So let's get over to shooting guard on FanDuel. 2,800 or 28% owned, Jordan Poole. Next, Norman Powell, 5,600, 23% owned. I'm going to have a lot of Clippers, and Norman Powell is one of the guys that I'm going to have a decent amount of. The ceiling is just giant in this new Clippers with no Leonard, no PG-13. He's going to have games like he did versus Denver where he goes for 37. His normal games, probably around 20 points, right around that. And not going to give you a ton in rebounds, assists, steals, blocks, but it's those high point games. It's essentially a slightly less explosive scorer, like Cam Thomas, for the Clippers, just with Harden taking, a bunch of usage. But I'm going to have some Powell. I think it's a great matchup, and it is one of those ones where he could have one of those huge ceilings. Just temper expectations, because most likely outcome is 25, which is fine. It's not going to kill you, but it's not winning you anything. We do need one of those big performances for him to win. Kelly Oubre, 6,400. Not really a pivot, but he is my first kind of pivot that I wanted to talk about. Versus Detroit, he has a solid ceiling. He's been consistent so far, but we really need one of those 50-point games out of him. And can he do it? Yes, if he gets hot and he's hitting those boards like he can, Then it gets interesting, in a matchup versus Detroit is a good one for that. They haven't been good versus small forward, 26 overall in fantasy scoring. I'm fine to get there. Next, Brandon Podimski, we talked about. Bilal Koulibaly. He's 5,600, so his price is up there a little bit. However, there's no Kuzma. He goes from, a 0.81 fantasy guy to closer to a 0.9 fantasy per minute guy, and he should play extra minutes. He should be 35 plus in a good matchup versus the Hawks, so I'm definitely interested in him. Some of the ceiling is out when he's at 5,600. He can go high 30s, low 40s, but anything above that is probably going to be hard for him to get to. Simons, we talked about. Halliburton, we talked about. Let's move on to DraftKings shooting guard. We have talked about all the high-owned guys. Powell, Bilal, Mann, Carlton, Schroeder. Let's move it to small forward. Norman Powell's highest owned. Jalen Johnson is next, 8,200, 17% owned. This is one of the games that I love, and it is the type of game that Jalen Johnson can really go nuts. He just went for 57 versus them 2 nights ago, and he loves these kind of games where he can rack up boards, can rack up steals and blocks, and I'm fine to go back here. 8,200 with his type of ceiling is just not enough to scare me off. He's regularly in that high 30s, low 40s with that huge ceiling, so I'm in for some Jalen. Tobias Harris, 6K, 17% owned. All right, so he is cheap for being Tobias Harris, but this role is not as good for him as it was last year. He's at 0.66 fantasy points per minute right now over his last 5. He has not been playing well with this Detroit team. I have a very hard time to want to play Tobias. Now, his baseline last year would say we got to be hammering this, but I'm going to have a little, more so because he should be more of like a 0.85, 0.9 fantasy per minute guy, and he's playing well below that. So I'm going to have a little because he may snap back to that throughout the season, but right now it's looking ugly, and if he is super high owned, this is a great fade in my opinion. Oubre, we talked about. RJ Barrett. All right, Toronto's beat up. Quickly is doubtful. Scotty Barnes is out. They already were without Bruce Brown. His usage is going to be crazy. He had high usage last time. The worry here is he played only 29 minutes in that first game. I would expect he does play a little bit more, but probably not a ton more. But it is a very good matchup versus the Hornets, who just aren't good. I like it, but I do worry about this Toronto Raptors offense and their ability, even versus a poor defense, to really get much going. So I like Barrett, but there is some worry there. The level of usage that he should have in this game should be off the charts. So for that reason, I like him and I'm considering him, but there are worries there. Miles Bridges, he's in an absolute smash spot. I definitely like him in this game. His fantasy point per minute is much lower with LaMelo Ball out there. He's more like a 0.95 or 1 fantasy per minute guy, but it is a very good matchup versus the Raptors, who also are getting worse without Scotty Barnes and Scotty Barnes' defense out there. So definitely a great matchup, and we'll have some. Corey Kispert, he has a solid ceiling when he gets it going. He played 34 minutes last time, 24, 26 the first 2 games. I think there's a chance he slides back into the starting lineup tonight with their injuries. And he's a guy that can score in bunches. So I'm interested. I think 4,900 is getting up there a little bit for his price, but he can drop us 40. So I'm interested in that at 4,900. Brandon Ingram. Zion's going to be there. However, it is a back-to-back, so maybe they take it a little easier with Zion. If that is the case, Brandon Ingram starts to look super good, as Ingram benefits the most from Zion not being there. Now, even if Zion's there, I do like Ingram in this spot versus the Warriors. there's just so much he can do. And hey, he had a decent game. He scored 30 last night. He just didn't add anything with rebounds, assists, blocks, or steals. He goes 25 and say 8 and 3 with a block or a steal, and it's looking really good. He doesn't need to score 30 again, but he's in a great spot to do it. Very interested in Ingram. Next, OG Anunoby, 5,700. It's not a great spot versus the Heat. I just like his chances for a ceiling when nobody's going to be there and the minutes that he plays. Interested, but definitely not going overboard on him. Now, let's get over to small forward on DraftKings. RJ Barrett, 26%. We talked about him. Jason Tatum, 9,800. I'm very interested in Tatum in an up-pace spot. He can absolutely crush and cook this Pacers team. He went for 70 in the playoffs last year for him. Even during the regular season, he had a 69 and had 60s, so he can definitely get there versus them. He is likely to deal with Siakam defense, though, which, you don't love to see, but he can do it versus anybody, so absolutely interested in Tatum. Keyshawn George, 3,400. He could see an uptick in minutes today, and with that, he does become interesting. We just got to watch to see what the lineups are and kind of figure out that it's not a slam dunk at this point. I would say Koulibaly is much safer and has a solid ceiling there. All right, power forward on FanDuel, Jalen Johnson, 17% owned. Tobias Harris, 17% owned. We talked about both them. Dorian Finney-Smith, 4,500. This is an interesting spot versus the Memphis Grizzlies. He's just coming off a 34-point performance where he played 37 minutes. Now, I don't think he's going to play that kind of minutes again. He's been more in that 25 to 30. 28 minutes for him, 26, something like that. Sounds about where he should be. He's only like a 0.77 fantasy point per minute guy. So he should be rostered, but I do worry about his ceiling. I wouldn't go super hard on him, but I'll have a little bit. Paulo Banchero. How do you not want to talk about Paulo right now? Dude has been unreal, and I think that's going to continue. I think he's going to average, 27 to 30 real points per game this season. This dude is a legit scorer, just put up 50. He's in that Tatum range where I'm fine to play him any night. He can do it in a lot of different ways. He's not as consistent as Tatum yet, but he does have that type of ceiling. So I'm fine if you want to go there. I'm not getting into a ton of them today. All right, pivots. Victor Wembanyama. So he hasn't done much this season. His minutes have all been all over the place. 28, 30, 35. He's versus OKC, though, who he did have some very solid games against. In February, went for 73. In January, went for 56. But then also put up a 28-minute absolute stinker where he went 4 for 15. I'm interested in some Wemby just because that ceiling is there, and we haven't seen one of those games yet. I'm not going to have a ton of Wemby, but I'm definitely going to have some. There's plenty of value out there to be able to get him. Bridges, we talked about already. Definitely like him. Ingram as well. Alex Sarr. So last 2 games, he's played 25, 27 minutes. He's got 30 and 27. He's at 5,600, and he's in a very good matchup versus Atlanta. And the Wizards have a few less, or are a little less healthy with Kuzma being a power forward and out. There is more of a chance that he does start once again and maybe plays a few extra minutes. If he takes this 27 minutes up to 30, he starts to look super interesting, especially with his ability to get steals and blocks and all that versus an Atlanta team that isn't all that great. And then OG, we talked about. So moving it on over to DraftKings, our high-owned Paulo Banchero, 9,100. That is cheap for Paulo. Definitely willing to go there. Tatum, we talked about. Noah Clowney, 3,700. All right, so Claxton is out, but Ben Simmons is probably back. Clowney's probably coming off the bench, playing 20 to 24 minutes. with Simmons probably in that 24 range. I'm fine to go there. I don't absolutely love the spot, but he will have better usage coming off the bench than he will be as a starter. So slightly interesting. DFS, we have already talked about. Jonathan Mogbo, got to bring him up with the Toronto injury situation. Now, he can play power forward, and we could have RJ Barrett go to small forward. So it is a little interesting kind of considering him. He had that one game where he got 24 minutes and went nuts. If he gets some extra minutes, he's a little bit interesting. We have him at 21 minutes right now. Not sure how it's going to break down because he's going to come off the bench. So it is a little bit risky, but there is some ceiling there. Just like there is for Schneed, who I like at point guard a little bit. So definitely some interest there. Now, getting over to center on FanDuel. Vika Zubac. I'm going to have a lot of Zubac. He's 20% owned. He has been crushing it. He's 7,200. 34 minutes, 39, 38. And what we have seen when there is no Leonard, no George, he becomes one of the main guys again, and that's exactly what's happening. Big time rebounding upside, big time scoring upside. I'm all in on some Zubac tonight versus the Trailblazers. And DeAndre Ayton, who can be incredibly inconsistent. So very interested in Zubac. He's also done well versus them before. So definitely like the zoo. Clowney, we talked about. Joval. Look, Joval's, he might start. He may come off the bench again. Not too sure. But the one thing I do know is he's probably not going to play many minutes. And without playing a lot of minutes, I just can't get there. I just don't think the ceiling is really there until he gets 25 plus minutes. And maybe he does get that if he's, really scoring at scoring and getting rebounds at a very high clip. But I would expect him to kind of just match Capella's minutes, which Capella's only been around 22. So why would they push Joval any more than that? All right. We talked about the Wemby pivot. Nick Richards versus Toronto. I've said I've liked this game. We've talked about it a lot. But the thing with Richards is he played 30 minutes and 35. His first game, he only played 24, but he had 5 fouls. He had foul trouble. You're now in a matchup versus the Hornets, which is a great matchup, and I would expect we have him at 28.5, and I think that's low. I think that there's likely a path to him at 30 to 34, with 32 probably being more likely. We have him at 0.9 fantasy points per minute. You add 3 points to this projection, and he's starting to look pretty nice. So I think there's absolutely a possibility that we should be raising his projection or his minutes a little bit. And we know the ceiling is there because he can get blocks in bunches. Had 3 blocks and a steal last game, 1 block the game before that, 2 the game before that. He's an interesting spot. And then Alex Sarr we talked about already. Moving it on over to Draftkings. Jacob Podol, 6,300. Nick Richards, Clowney, 4,800 for Richards is just a steal. I would be all over that. Jacob Podol, fine to go here. My worry is Podol does rely on being able to get the ball on the post. And if they don't have a good passer, it might be a little bit hard to get that ball down there. So he may have to manufacture more himself, which I think hurts his overall game. I am interested in Podol a bit, but I'm not going super hard on him right now. But it is a good matchup for the Hornets, so you got to consider it. And I think if Schneed plays instead of Mitchell at point, Podol becomes a little interesting just because Schneed can run the offense and Mitchell isn't great at running an offense. So that'll do it for us today, guys. We will be back tomorrow with more DFS talk on Halloween Day. Also coming out with more prop shows tomorrow, and the Thursday night DFS show should come out tonight. You guys have a good one. The Thursday night football, that is. Have a good one. We will be back. Let's go. Like, comment, subscribe. Peace.